It is Sunday, 7th of June, 2020. I've got a feeling that videos from this time, this era in history, are going to be looked back upon with great interest in the years and decades to come, when people try and get a hold on what was on people's minds during this monumental time of change and shift, because that's clearly what we're going through right now in so many ways. I had intended to make a video yesterday, Saturday the 6th of June, 6/6, but I felt in no fit state or no reasonable mood to come on and record anything then. I was feeling very agitated and very unsettled and in a very strange mood yesterday. And I do have to wonder if that was down to all the electrical energy that was in the atmosphere. We had thunderstorms in my part of the UK yesterday. I know these happened in other parts of this country and also in the US. And also it's been a full moon the last couple of nights as well. So I do have to wonder whether the energy of all of that was affecting my moods and my emotions. So I wanted to hold off until today to record this. And it really does feel like we're in biblical times. Things are getting epic. And there is definitely a battle between good and evil playing out right now. I mean, who doesn't feel this? Yesterday was a monumental day in history in terms of the aftermath of the George Floyd event, which many researchers have shown gives all the indications of having been yet another orchestrated false flag hoax type event. Many people have been all over it. They've exposed all the usual anomalies and all the usual strange things you get with it. Not least, there was a tweet that I came across this morning that somebody had sent to me, seemingly indicating advanced knowledge of this event on behalf of the Obama Foundation, who posted a tweet on the 17th of May with an image in place, an iconic kind of picture, which showed the face of what appeared to be George Floyd. And this was some days before the alleged event involving the police officer Derek Chauvin actually went down. And, you know, people have analysed this tweet and they've shown that this is an image that was originally posted with it. The image has not been updated since, and it appears to smack of foreknowledge of this event coming. So that's just one of many smoking guns when it comes to this. We also have the fact that George Floyd and Derek Chauvin both appear to have been porn stars, and people have dug up footage of these two doing their thing. So George was into straight porn, allegedly, and Derek was into gay gangbangs, so researchers have uncovered. We also know that the two of them worked together at the same nightclub in Minneapolis for a time, suggesting that they most probably knew each other. And just the fact that they appeared in porn movies shows you that they are, to all intents and purposes, actors. So we need to process that. Yesterday we had the big march on Washington DC in the aftermath to this event. And of course we know that Antifa have got involved at the behest of George Soros, billionaire financier and Illuminati bagman. You know, one of the key players in all these orchestrated psyops and social engineering agendas. Soros's name is all over these things, just as much as Bill Gates's is. So yesterday was a very momentous day with all of that going down. And it's not surprising that it feels like change is in the air one way or another. There are lots of Georges that are cropping up in the narrative right now, I have to note. I posted a great meme during the week which features Gene Wilder as Willy Wonka from the Chocolate Factory. You know, this is a blank meme that gets filled in all the time with different captions. And this one simply had him saying, "Oh, you're rioting and looting for George Floyd or Soros?" Then we have JFK Jr.'s political magazine of the 1990s. For anyone that's been following the whole JFK Jr. /Q/Trump narrative, whatever your viewpoint is on it, it is a fact that during the 90s, JFK Jr. was the executive publisher of a magazine called George. And on first glance at it, you might wonder why he chose to call his magazine George. But then when you get into elements of the JFK assassination back in 1963, you realise that George H.W. Bush, George Bush Sr., played a very key role in events in Dallas that day. He was certainly present in the city. We've got evidence of that. And many researchers are of the view that he was a key coordinator in what happened to JFK. So could JFK Jr., his son, have been giving a sly nod to George Bush not in a positive way, by naming his political magazine George. George Bush was known as Timberwolf. That was one of his code names within political circles. So it would be understandable why JFK Jr. would bear a pretty major grudge against George Bush. And maybe that was what the whole advent of that magazine was all about, in part trying to expose the deep state, the political system, and what the likes of George Bush have been responsible for through all these decades. Interesting one to think of, right? And then we've got George Floyd, we've got George Soros in this latest event. The really good blank meme that does the rounds, which is a picture of Dr. Evil, the Mike Myers character from the Austin Powers movies, stroking this dog and on the telephone at his control panel, a parody of Blofeld from the Bond films. And I posted one in the week that I discovered, and somebody's got Dr. Evil saying, okay, the coronavirus pandemic didn't work, it's running out of steam. The Black Lives Matter PSYOP actually united more people than it divided. So get ready to unleash round 2 of the corona, and if that fails, we'll go all out with the full-scale alien invasion. It's a very amusing meme, but it does say lots because it speaks to a control system, a regime that is getting desperate. They really are rolling out everything they've got and throwing it at us all at once, as if the whole COVID-19 scam, plandemic, didn't contain everything you could imagine. They very quickly pulled the race riots narrative out of the bag and dropped that on us as well. And sadly, many people have been falling for it hook, line and sinker. Many people haven't yet got wise to how these social engineering psyops work. So we've had people here in the UK demonstrating yesterday, Saturday. There were people out on the streets of many cities demonstrating, purportedly for justice for George Floyd and showing their support for black people and this Black Lives Matter movement. The truth is, all lives matter. And when you approach this from the point of view of a holistic, intelligent, inner standing of how life and creation work, you realise that it doesn't matter whether somebody's white, black, brown or green. All lives are equal and they all have the same value, and the rights and freedoms of all of us are equal as well. So it's not a case of Black Lives Matter. But nevertheless, people have fallen for this. There's a lot of virtue signalling going on. A lot of people on Facebook who never normally make any kind of political comments have been posting up that they stand in solidarity with George Floyd and posting the Black Lives Matter logo and all this. I find it incredible that people were out protesting in face masks, many of them. I mean, just imagine the irony of this. People are out protesting on the streets, but they're still wearing face masks because they still think, it's around and it's going to get them. People in the UK will be protesting about the rights of a man they've never met thousands of miles away across the Atlantic, and yet they didn't protest about the loss of their own rights and freedoms and the imposition of a tyrannical regime, which is so obvious to see that it couldn't be more obvious if it smashed you violently around the head with a baseball bat, screaming through a bullhorn, "I am a tyrannical regime." So the only reason so many people were out rioting, protesting, demonstrating, is because the media had entrained them to do so. They bought the hashtag, they bought the logo. And when it comes to figuring out that your own rights and freedoms are being affected and that the future for your own children is looking devastating unless we stand up and do something and take the power into our own hands, people don't seem capable of making those connections in their minds when it's down to us to organise ourselves on our own terms rather than on the terms of somebody else coming from a social engineering think tank. So I find that incredible. But just the fact that they've had to pull this race riots tool out of their toolkit at this time, because clearly they must have been feeling that the plandemic, the coronavirus narrative, was failing and they had to do something else, opt for plan B to continue to justify martial law and house arrest and all these measures that they want to introduce. It smacks of a control system, a regime that knows its days are numbered. It's in its death throes now. It's getting absolutely desperate to cling onto power by any means necessary, which means they may have something else in the bag that they pull out in the coming weeks. not to doom-monger about it. On the contrary, I think the fact that we have clear indication that this control system knows it's on the way out, and that has to be a positive thing. Certainly doesn't mean that any of us should be sitting around just waiting for things to get better, just waiting for events to play out in some kind of biblical prophecy. We still need to be stepping up our effort and doing all we can to expose this scam, this sham of the coronavirus situation. Imagine the effect if we could get through to the general public, the masses, and demonstrate beyond all doubt that this whole thing was cooked up and the whole thing is based on lies and deceptions. And it would be accelerated even quicker if we could just bring together all the elements, all the strands which prove this into one coherent narrative, into one place, and present the whole thing. Find a way of getting it presented to the general public who are still living in fear-based mind control. They're still complying with the tyranny because they're scared. They've had the bejesus scared out of them by the architects of this situation. But sooner or later, these people are going to have to be forced to face truth, forced to accept the reality of our situation. And it is legitimate, and it is right action for them to be forced, because them continuing to live in a state of ignorance and continuing to meekly and obediently comply with their own slavery means that everybody else, those of us that do care about rights and freedoms, we do understand what they are, and we do not consent to having them taken away on the basis of lies and deceptions which are provably so. We don't want to be held in collective punishment with these other people, and if their actions or their lack of action or their apathy or their ignorance is causing us to have to live in that state, then we have every right to force them to confront the truth of the matter, because they're doing damage and harm and causing loss to everybody by remaining in that state, and they have no right to do that. This is real rights and freedoms under natural law in creation. So it is legitimate to force people to face the truth, and we all benefit when they do, right? So lots of different strands. This week we heard that Italian Parliament is calling for the arrest of Bill Gates on crimes against humanity. Obviously, calling for an arrest and the arrest actually taking place are two separate things, and it's just a shame that the story wasn't that Gates has been arrested, because there surely is enough evidence to convict this guy to, at the very least, life imprisonment, and that would be him getting off lightly, although there'll be more for him to pay in what lies beyond this life, you can be sure of that. But just the fact that Italian Parliament has formally charged Bill Gates, not in the sense of a legal case, but they've accused him of crimes against humanity, has to be an encouraging thing. We can only wish and hope that other governments and other powerful bodies follow suit in that regard. We also had a report this week that the Interior Ministry of the German political system has declared that COVID-19 is a hoax, and they've assimilated massive evidence, it's not like there's any shortage of it out there, to prove beyond any reasonable doubt that the governments and these different powerful bodies in the world colluded together to create this scamdemic as an excuse for bringing in all kinds of totalitarian dystopian measures, as we know. That's another encouraging sign then. That's coming from an official political body within German Parliament. It's just a shame we don't have any such calls from the UK, which is full of servile, boot-licking sycophants to the system. Not a backbone or a pair of balls among them. Not even the women. So we have those items to throw into the mix. We also have a Facebook group which a friend of mine diverted me to, and I'll put the link to it below. I'll put the link to all the articles that I'm discussing in this video in the notes below. This particular Facebook thread consists of people who have lost close family members due to some cause of death or other, And yet they've had the doctors marking up the cause of death as COVID-19, or it's been mentioned that they died with COVID-19 when these people know that their family members died of something else, completely unconnected with COVID-19. Many, many people are coming forward with this evidence. This particular Facebook thread is a great resource for it, if it could only be presented to the public in some kind of meaningful way, along with the rest of the evidence. So we have to find ways of keeping this going, because wouldn't it be beautiful if the wheels completely fell off this scam, and even the so-called normies, the members of the general public, were forced to confront the fact that we've been lied to, and then watch the likes of Boris Johnson and Matt Hancock and Chris Whitty squirming as they try to explain how they can justify what they've done to us through the lockdowns, through the decimation of the economy, through all the suicides and all the other devastating health impacts of what's been done in this country. And they continue to bang the drum for it. We continue to get scare stories put out in the disgusting, disgraceful, treacherous mainstream media, the BBC and all the others. These so-called newscasters, so-called journalists are nothing but traitors. Traitors to their land, their people, traitors to God and to creation itself. And again, believe there will be a heavy price to pay for that, for taking a paycheck and a salary and a pension plan over and above the rights and freedoms of other people and selling them out just for the sake of your job. Wouldn't want to be you on Judgment Day. But they've been rolling out these scare stories, so there's been lots of talk of mandatory vaccination still coming in, mandatory testing, the track and trace thing, and if you're found to have been in contact with somebody that's tested positive for COVID-19, you're going to be forced to self-quarantine for 14 days. Calls for all this. There's talk of digital IDs, of the microchipping agenda being rolled out in conjunction with the vaccines. And this is just it. A lot of it is just talk. It's rhetoric. It's designed to scare people. It's designed to keep them paranoid. It's designed to keep them in a state of fear-based mind control. And it's working, because if you spend all day looking at these mainstream media headlines and putting on the BBC News, and a bulletin breaks and you have this solemn, stern-looking newsreader, COVID-19, latest, and all this dramatic music in the background, and then a picture of that bloody COVID logo thing that they've got, that spiky organism that's supposed to represent the virus, you are going to be scared. And the best advice to anyone like that is turn the goddamn TV off and stop picking up so-called newspapers and try and look at some alternative information. But a lot of it is talk, and they're saying what they plan and what they intend to do. And as I mentioned in last week's video, for most people, most of these measures that we're being warned about aren't going to come into our lives. They're not going to affect us directly. We can spend all day getting scared about it and thinking, what if, oh my God, what if this happens to my family? The chances are it won't, statistically. And it just reminds me of something I often say to my kids. This anecdote turns out to be relevant, so bear with it. When I'm trying to get my kids to do something like get in their pajamas and brush their teeth ready for bed, I find myself having to ask them several times. This will be a familiar situation to many parents. And they'll often say to me, yeah, we'll do it in a minute. Yeah, don't worry, give me a couple of minutes. And I found myself saying to them often, which of these three scenarios results in you actually being in your pajamas with your teeth actually brushed? Is it A, saying you'll do it, B, thinking about it, or C, actually putting on your pajamas and actually brushing your teeth? And my kids hate it when I put it this way, but I think it illustrates the point. You can talk about something, you can say you're going to do something, but until you actually do it and put it into physical manifestation, it just remains an idea or an intent. It only becomes reality when you actually do it. And so we have to make sure that the control system, specifically in the UK, I'm speaking for the people of so-called great, what a joke, Britain right now, we have to ensure that things just don't reach the stage where this control system is able to impose all these things that they're warning us about and threatening us about and saying that they want to do. We've already heard that face coverings, these stupid bloody masks, which so much science, even from the World Health Organization themselves, have shown don't offer any kind of protection against any sort of virus. Not that a virus is what we thought it was anyway, but the face masks are completely useless, completely pointless, and they actually cause more damage than they do good, because you're trapping your own bacteria and your own droplets of breath and spittle behind this mask and then breathing it in all day, which is not a great idea. It's supposed to be expelled. It's a natural bodily function. So we're told that these mandatory face masks are going to come in for public transport from the 15th of June. So if you get on a bus, a train, a plane or a ferry, you're going to have to wear one of these things. And you can bet it's going to be policed by the slaves themselves, because you don't need a slave master when the slaves police themselves. You try getting on a bus without one of these face masks on and you will get called out by the rest of the bus. No authority figure necessary. There'll be virtue signalling again because they drank the Kool-Aid and swallowed the mind control. But isn't that an interesting date? It comes in on the 15th of June. So again, you get on a bus or a plane or a train on the 14th of June and you'll be just fine. But on the 15th, whoosh, there it is, it knows what date it is. Whoosh. But the 15th of June, many British people will realise that that is a significant date in the closest thing to a constitution that we have left, namely the Magna Carta, signed into action on the 15th of June, 1215. Is it any kind of accident or random chance that these measures are being introduced on the 15th of June of all dates? Or is this another way in which the control system is mocking the people of Britain and rubbing our noses in it by taking away even more of our rights and freedoms on a date when the closest thing to a constitution, which was designed to protect against these rights and freedoms being taken away by a tyrannical control system, was signed into place? I would suggest it's no coincidence, and I would suggest it's just one more reason to add to the many to take down this regime right now. It knows it's going down. We just have to accelerate the efforts. To me, the masks are symbolic of muzzles that you would put on a dog. So people with a mask on, they can't speak properly, they can't express themselves as they would naturally. So that's symbolic in itself. You're wearing a mask and you're being prevented from speaking out. You're not speaking out against tyranny if you're complying and wearing a mask. And also, muzzles get put on dogs, and that is how the controllers see the masses, the useless eaters. They perceive us as dogs, as their pets, as owned commodities. So when we conform and we put on one of these masks, which have no scientific or medical benefit whatsoever, we're symbolizing our compliance with our overlords. And I know that many people will not be able to get around like they need to without getting on a bus or a train, and they're going to be forced to wear one of these masks. That's obviously different to voluntarily choosing to wear one. But either way, it's an unacceptable situation, and this lot have got to go. And just the fact that they're getting so sloppy, they're getting so desperate, they're rolling everything out all at once, indicates that they're panicking. Normally, they take a much more patient, measured approach to things. So we can know that the wheels are really falling off. And it's worth bearing in mind that every regime, every control system throughout the course of human history has eventually failed and crumbled and been destroyed. And it's disappeared. Every one you could mention, even the most powerful ones, like the Roman Empire. These institutions might last for decades, centuries even, but eventually they do implode and destroy themselves. When they're based in evil, when they're based in injustice, it's inevitable that they can't last forever. Truth always rises to the surface. Love and righteous action always trumps, excuse the pun, any kind of evil and tyranny and injustice. So we can know that the control system that's presided over us for way too long was never going to last forever. There was always going to be a time when it would fail. And I feel that time has come. And I feel that we're going to be witnessing that in the weeks and months ahead. Again, this is not any kind of excuse for any of us sitting back and doing nothing. If anything, we need to double down in our efforts and do even more of what we were doing before. But evil always fails in the end, and evildoers always face the consequences and the judgment for the harm and the loss and the misery and the suffering and the death that they've caused to other people. It will be no different this time. It would be very satisfying for many of us to see the likes of Bill Gates and Anthony Fauci, Boris Johnson, Matt Hancock, so many other traitors that we could name, George Soros, in prison for what they've done. We may or may not get to see that, but we can know that every one of these individuals and many, many others who've put great evil into the world, and there's so much evidence of that coming out now, will be paying the price. If they don't pay the price in this life, in this physical reality, they'll be paying it in some other form, in some other state. We can know that, like we know the sun is coming up tomorrow morning. So it really does feel like biblical times. It really does feel like a battle between good and evil. Everyone needs to pick a side. And if you pick the side of good, it means being courageous, being brave, standing up and letting your voice be heard, not cowering away in the shadows for fear of the consequences. We need every voice and every heart and every mind and every soul we can get on the side of good and right action and truth and freedom right now. Because if you're not on that side, you're on the other side. And you're going to end up going the same way as all the perpetrators and the evildoers that populate that side. With that being said, I want to read out an extract from an incredible letter, an open letter to POTUS, President of the United States, Donald J. Trump. This was sent from, let me just get this guy's name right, Carlo Maria Vigano, titular Archbishop of Upiana, former apostolic nuncio to the United States of America. Now, I know any mention of the Catholic Church is going to bring about a certain response in many people because of what we know them to have been involved with. In this instance, I just want people to pay attention to the wording of this letter. You can make of it what you will. I won't comment on it any further, but I think the contents of it speak for themselves. And I think what this particular Archbishop has had to say to President Trump will resonate with so many of us. Let me just read some of the pertinent extracts from this open letter which has been sent this week. He says, "It appears that the children of darkness, whom we may easily identify with the deep state, which you wisely oppose, and which is fiercely waging war against you in these days, have decided to show their cards, so to speak, by now revealing their plans. They seem to be so certain of already having everything under control that they have laid aside that circumspection that until now had at least partially concealed their true intentions. The investigations already underway will reveal the true responsibility of those who managed the COVID emergency, not only in the area of healthcare, but also in politics, the economy, and the media. We will probably find that in this colossal operation of social engineering, are people who have decided the fate of humanity, arrogating to themselves the right to act against the will of the citizens and their representatives. Just a bit further on in the letter, he says, "We will also discover that the riots in these days were provoked by those who, seeing that the virus is inevitably fading and that the social alarm of the pandemic is waning, necessarily have had to provoke civil disturbances." This guy knows what time it is, I'm telling you. He also goes on to say, "The American people are mature and have now understood how much the mainstream media does not want to spread the truth, but seeks to silence and distort it, spreading the lie that is useful for the purposes of their masters. Before the power of prayer, the deceptions of the children of darkness will collapse. Their plots will be revealed. Their betrayal will be shown. Their frightening power will end in nothing, brought to light and exposed for what it is, an infernal deception." What this Archbishop Carlo Maria Vigano is saying in that letter pretty much echoes what I speak to creation every evening now when I do what I refer to as my walk and talk with God. I go out in nature close to where I live and I speak out loud my intention and my will in terms of what I wish to see manifest in this world, in this physical reality. And it pretty much echoes what that guy is saying in that letter. So just the fact that he's calling out social engineering agendas and he's calling out the mainstream media for being the treacherous vipers that they are, spreading the lies and the propaganda, is incredible stuff coming from someone in that position. I'll put a link to the full letter in the show notes below if you want to go and see what else this guy had to say. So it's time to buckle in and get ready for an amazing rest of year. I mean, 2020, for most people, has been a piece of shit so far in terms of our personal experiences. But in terms of how the rest of the year is going to play out, I think we've seen nothing yet. And we have to be prepared for it. So a lyric from Prince springs to mind here, from his song Money Don't Matter Tonight, where he says, "That's when you realise you're better off making sure your soul's all right." It's definitely time to make sure we're prepared on a soul level for what's around the corner. A biblical play out of good versus evil. Collectively, it's going to be us that decides how it all pans out. It always is. We can't just sit back and leave it to God or leave it to Q or leave it to Trump. God helps those who help themselves. We have to instigate this. But we do have the collective power to put down this evil control system that we're all so sick and tired of. I'm so sick of their stunts. I've been studying how they pull off their social engineering tricks and their mind control mechanisms for 10 years. And I'm just so utterly tired of every time one of these comes along. And you know, Ole Damagard must be bloody sick to the back teeth of taking apart all these false flag terror events as well. I bet Ole would like to be doing something else with his life other than having to plough into one of these every time it comes along. I bet when the George Floyd incident started, Ole was like, "Must I? Okay, here we go again." You know what I mean? This is going to be the last video that I do in this particular location. So you're not going to get this backdrop, bit of a boring ass one, in any future videos because I and my family are going to be moving house in about 5 days from now to a new location. So that does mean this will be the last video that I'll be able to do for a while I get settled into the new place and we begin this new chapter, this new start in our lives, which we all need so much right now. So I'll see you when I see you. Got a lot of memories in this place. I've been in this particular home for 18 years. During that time, I got married. We had both of our kids. I woke up in this house. I've put out all my videos, all my interviews, all my content over the past 10 years from this particular location. So I'm going to miss it, but it is time for new horizons and a new chapter. And so I'll see you on the other side. Incredible things are happening, and 2020 is far from a done deal yet. Like I say, let's make sure our souls are prepared and we're on the right side of this battle between good and evil, because it's going down, and trust me, you wouldn't want to be on the wrong side when it does. This is a quick addendum to the previous video because there were a couple of items that I forgot to put in there which are very important and are worth adding. The first involves what purports to be an interview with Prince Charles by Sky News, which emerged this weekend. The only problem is, when you watch it, you realise it ain't Prince Charles. It's an impersonator. He doesn't look enough like him, he doesn't sound enough like him, and it's clear that they're trying to con the public into believing that Prince Charles is still out there. So this raises the question of what has happened to Prince Charles and what's happened to the royals generally. There's been some very strange stuff involving the Queen and Buckingham Palace, which appears to be deserted, and the mainstream is doing its best to try and convince the public that it's business as usual and they're all still around, but they're not. The other item involves Hillary Clinton, who was in court this week in America concerning the private email case that goes all the way back to the Pizzagate era. Did you know about that? Did you hear about Hillary being in court this week? Well, if you didn't, you could be forgiven because the mainstream media has completely ignored it. And has there been anything else going on in the news this week that's kind of eclipsed that story and stopped people from looking in that direction and looking in a different direction, I wonder? Either way, Hillary is due back in court in September. She lost her appeal in the case, so this one continues. And another song lyric springs to mind at this point from John Lennon, Nobody Told Me. Nobody told me there'd be days like these. Strange days indeed. Let's keep winning.